That was good.
All right. Ahem.
So let's jump into it.
All righty. Do you got any ideas?
Hey everyone, it's Elliot.
And Todd. Welcome to Two Designers Walk Into a Bar, an ongoing conversation about pop culture and iconic design.
We want you.
If you're looking for something to volunteer for, if you're ready to be part of something bigger than yourself,
Something that will make you see the world in a new way and make new friends.
while spending some time together in the trenches or back home supporting the effort.
Then listen to our wartime propaganda episode.
Today we're discussing the histories of two of the most iconic posters and characters in the world.
Rosie the Riveter and Uncle Sam. It's time to salute the bartender while asking for a couple of red, white, and blue shooters.
We're falling in line and supporting the effort today in the bar.
All right, Todd, while we're waiting for our drinks, why don't you tell us who you brought with you to the bar today? Military posters, propaganda, there's all kinds of choices.
Well, Elliot, you saw the poster out front of our bar that said, "Tonight is ladies' night."
I did. That's the whole reason I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, I brought a friend that we've known for a really long time. I brought Rosie the Riveter.
Oh, what a great choice.
Yeah, cultural icon from the U.S. during World War II. And this is, I'm going to tell you, this was a more interesting story than I originally thought. It's the story of a simple workplace morale booster that became a legendary symbol of female empowerment.
Kind of like the poster for Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
Yeah, along that same line.
That's female empowerment.
It looks a little different, so let me describe it to you.
Okay.
If there might be a person out there who is not sure what I'm talking about. So the poster we're talking about, it has a woman determined, looking at the viewer. It's loaded with symbolism. For one thing, she's wearing a blue work uniform, which symbolizes the working class, like manufacturing, right? She's flexing her arm in a display of strength and confidence. And around her head, she has a red bandana with white polka dots, which adds a feminine touch while still looking strong, you know? And blue uniform, red bandana, white dots. What you got? Patriotism right there, my friend.
Yeah, red, white, and blue.
That's right. And behind all of that is a yellow background. So this creates a lot of contrast. We're talking red.
Just like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
Yeah. And above it is the slogan, "We can do it." It's not a call to action. It's a motivational slogan. And you know what's interesting is, unlike other war propaganda, it doesn't explicitly mention war, fighting enemies, or even patriotism. It's all like, gung-ho, we can do this.
I think it's understood, right? Like in the context of how and when the poster was presented.
Yeah, you're right. So for anyone who may not be aware, the U.S. entered World War II in 1941 after Pearl Harbor, and millions of men enlisted, creating this massive labor shortage, right?
Sure, yeah, of course.
So both government and industries, they launched efforts to recruit women into manufacturing jobs. And there were over 6 million working in these industries that supported aviation, munitions, welding, and even assembly lines. So let's talk about the poster, the "We Can Do It" poster. It was created in 1942 by Pittsburgh graphic artist J. Howard Miller for Westinghouse Electric. And it was created as a temporary morale booster for female workers.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so it was only created originally for Westinghouse? It wasn't created
Yes.
by the government?
Yes, and it gets even more
Interesting.
ironic, too.
Okay, and tell me about J. Howard Miller, because I mean, I've seen Rosie the Riveter any number of times over the years, but if you had asked me who the illustrator was, I couldn't have named this person.
Yeah, not very well-known name. He was hired by Westinghouse, their internal war production coordinating committee, to create actually a series of 42 posters.
Whoa, okay.
And the intent was to raise worker morale, to reduce absenteeism, to direct workers' questions to the proper management, and really to lower the likelihood of labor unrest or a strike. When you look at that poster now and you think, okay, we're just going to try to make these folks a little happier and not strike.
How many of these posters, in doing your research, did you find? Like, how many of them still exist today? Can you find all of them?
Not many.
Okay.
Not many. I didn't find many of them, but we'll put a couple of them on our website because they are a product of the time. And while Rosie has gone on to symbolize empowerment, some of the others, were were stuck way back in 1942. So, for instance,
was there one that said, "Woman, make me a pork chop"?
Yeah, sort of like that.
Westinghouse is making ovens so your husband can eat his dinner.
So most of the posters featured men, and one of them featured this smiling male manager, like natty dressed, and the words say, "Any questions about your work? Ask your supervisor." So only men were supervisors, evidently.
Probably, if I had to guess, only white men. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, true. I mentioned there were 42 posters that Miller designed, and each one was only displayed in certain Westinghouse factories for about 2 weeks, and then it went on to the next one in the series. And let me tell you a little bit about where they were in the factories and who they were geared towards. So I mentioned that they were in Westinghouse factories. They were specifically helmet factories in eastern Pennsylvania and in some Midwestern factories. And each poster, there were only 1,800 copies of each one printed, and they weren't gigantic. They were like 17 by 22 inches.
Okay.
And that's kind of cool. You think about Westinghouse paid this illustrator to do 42 posters that were really not a gigantic run. So I thought that was, pretty interesting.
And so I guess because they were internal is the reason why the design never had the Westinghouse logo on it or anything.
Well, if you look closely, Rosie is wearing a pin on her collar that identifies her as a Westinghouse floor worker.
Oh, interesting.
Factory floor worker, yeah. And there's a symbol at the bottom, too, that also says something about the Westinghouse War Production Committee or something.
Okay.
Although it featured a woman, it was interpreted as Westinghouse employees can do it, all working together. And the model was credited as a woman named Naomi Parker Fraley. Now, here's the funny thing. For like 50 years, she wasn't credited. The model was credited to be someone else. It wasn't until 2015 that they officially decided that she was the model.
How did that all come about?
Well, so J. Howard worked from photographs, and they discovered a photograph of Miss Fraley wearing a bandana, working on a piece of machinery, and I think it was dated 1942, and she looked just like who we think Rosie the Riveter is on this poster. So a professor from Seton Hall who was really into this poster and this effort did research and dug and declared it so. So there you go.
Okay.
But here's where it gets a little bit funky, because Rosie really just became a concept. Miller's poster wasn't initially called Rosie the Riveter at all. It was Norman Rockwell's painting that appeared on Memorial Day of the Saturday Evening Post in 1943 that was called Rosie the Riveter. And
Okay.
you've seen that one. It's a female riveter. She's enjoying lunch. She's wearing blue overalls. She's got red hair. She's a little bulkier. And on her lunchbox, it reads Rosie, and she has her foot on Mein Kampf, the Hitler book.
If I remember correctly, her pose, even though she's in this factory and has her foot on this book with her lunchbox, her pose is sort of feminine and dainty, which I think is a great contrast.
Yes, and it actually comes from a famous classical piece of art, too, that we can post as well.
Rockwell was brilliant. I mean, he was so brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, that piece in itself, I mean, we could have talked about both of those, but that one in itself is loaded with symbolism, and it's just beautiful. So the Westinghouse poster, as I said, was only displayed for 2 weeks, and then it disappeared for nearly 4 decades.
Really?
Yes. So Rockwell's Rosie prompted more female images to promote many, many war efforts. But the We Can Do It poster was never part of any of those. For 4 decades, it was known in history as a Westinghouse poster.
Really?
So the question you're going to ask is, okay, well, why are we so familiar with it today?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the the ether now. It's so popular. Yeah. Okay, yeah, tell me about that.
All right, so the rebirth of Not Rosie Rosie. Following the war, that's what I'm now calling it, Not Rosie Rosie.
Yeah.
Following the war, Rockwell's painting actually kind of sank into history. It wasn't used more because it would have to be licensed by Rockwell and the estate.
Sure,
it was
makes sense.
Heavily copyright protected.
Yeah.
So it couldn't be used as much. Conversely, the lack of protection for the We Can Do It image is one of the reasons it popped back up. And specifically in 1982, the We Can Do It poster was reproduced in a magazine article entitled Poster Art for Patriotism's Sake. It was a Washington Post magazine article. It was about posters in the collection of the National Archives.
So did Westinghouse, they were fine with, or Miller's estate, I guess? I would think Westinghouse, by default, wouldn't they have a copyright on the poster?
Well, I didn't dig into that after I saw that it was a looser copyright anyway. It probably was never registered.
Sure, because it was an internal thing.
Right. Copyright laws were very different. So it just went into public domain faster than they do now.
Wow.
But in 1982, it made that appearance, and then it started to show up in other things, and it was adopted to promote feminism. So the we was not we Westinghouse employees, it was we women, uniting women against gender inequality. And I think that's kind of interesting because the original concept was to control employees from labor unrest, right?
Right.
From there, it just picked up steam. It was in Smithsonian Magazine. They made a stamp of it. The original poster went on display in the National Museum of American History. So it just picked up steam, and like I said, it was in public domain, so it could be used by anyone. So interestingly enough, it probably is classified as one of the most overused U.S. symbols ever, but I love it for it symbolizes unity, it symbolizes equality. Even back then, during the Westinghouse use, women, American women, they were African American, they were Hispanic, they were Asian, they were white. They were all working together on these assembly lines, breaking down social barriers.
Yeah.
So that in itself started to lay this foundation toward equality, specifically gender equality. But it's been widely used, and it's been reimagined to represent diverse groups, including women of color, the LGBTQ plus community, disability rights, and even most recently, COVID-19 frontline workers. I'm going to leave you with this. I love this. I love the legacy because it evolved from a strong yet misidentified image by a different artist for a completely different purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And here's a quote. A guy named Ed Reese, who was a historian for Westinghouse, he said, actually, the original image was never shown to female riveters.
What?
Yeah. Remember, it was targeted at women making helmet liners.
Yeah, right, sure.
So he's quoted as saying, the image was more likely to have been named Helen the Helmet Liner Maker.
I like that, too.
Yeah, so not Rosie the Riveter. It's evolved from a wartime morale booster into a sort of this timeless symbol now of empowerment and equality. And her story reminds us that the contribution of women, they're powerful, and the legacy continues to inspire future generations.
Yeah, Rosie is a little bit different than the pinups I think about from World War II.
Yeah, a little bit.
So what do you think the Rosies were drinking after a hard day's work?
Great question. I'm sure it ranged from a beer to a cocktail to... Why are you asking?
Oh, I'm just looking for suggestions about what to order next.
Oh, boy. What a riveting conversation. I'm thinking you may want to get all retro and practice war rationing, you know?
What's that?
We'll be right back. Hi. We want to take a moment to mention that if you're enjoying this episode, we have an archive of topics ranging from the Olympics to movie posters,
Think Ghostbusters,
iconic images,
Think Bigfoot,
punk music,
The Ramones,
Saturday morning cartoons,
The Pink Panther,
and failed products like OK Soda. Visit our website at twodesignerswalkintoabar.com for full episode notes and visuals, the latest blog content, and to sign up for our newsletter.
Follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Find the links on our website or search using the phrase Two Designers Walk Into a Bar.
Most importantly, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps more people like you find podcasts like this.
And tell a friend about us. Send them a link to our podcast from your listening platform of choice.
And if you're inclined, buy our merchandise. Stickers, coasters, magnets, t-shirts. We're designers. We make good stuff, and it helps support the show.
Get in touch. Use the contact form on our website or send an email to hello@twodesignerswalkintoabar.com.
We read every message we get. Honest.
And we're available for speaking gigs. Email us to learn more.
Okay, now, back to the bar. All right, welcome back to the bar. We've got it all decorated in red, white, and blue tonight. It's ladies' night, as I said. We're talking about Rosie, not Rosie the Riveter. And Elliot has also brought a pretty famous poster to the bar as well. So, Elliot, tell us who you got with you today.
Yeah, it is ladies' night, but Todd, I decided to bring my uncle along. Is that okay?
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
It's Uncle's night too, I guess.
It is. And I think you can probably guess which uncle we're talking about, and that is, of course, Uncle Sam. And as you see, I'm unrolling the poster here. It's the famous one that says, "I want you for U.S. Army." Not the U.S. Army, just Uncle Sam was a man of fewer words. He was very economical with his language.
Yep.
And of course, this shows Uncle Sam pointing his finger directly at you, the viewer, in order to recruit soldiers for the American Army. And this was back during World War I. You talked about World War II.
Okay.
So this was used during World War II, which is probably why it's still so famous.
Yeah.
But it originally came about to recruit soldiers for World War I.
Oh,
and so underneath the "I want you for U.S. Army" phrase, it says nearest recruiting station, and then it has a blank space below that to add the address for the station nearest whoever was, looking at the poster. So popping in. But the poetry to me, I would say the poetry with this is there are probably some people, as I say the artist's name, if they don't know who it was, they'll know it once I say it here, because it's so patriotic. It's so perfect. You can't make this up. The artist is an illustrator named James Montgomery Flagg. I just love that so much. It's so poetic. Although Flagg is spelled with 2 G's. So,
like Fanny Flagg.
Yeah, if you will. So is that what you call a loincloth, Todd?
Oh, okay. Not getting into that.
Getting the weeds here.
All right, so World War I.
Yeah, so World War I, originally known as the Great War. So this was not only a war that spanned the globe, but it was, Todd, the first war that really involved media around the globe, right? When you think about it. Never before had an event been conveyed to the public in such an immersive way, and with a burgeoning media landscape that had things like illustrated newspapers, early photography, advertising, and the rapidly advancing medium of cinema. So we have to think about all these opportunities for symbolism. So Flagg's 1917 poster was based on a British poster from a few years earlier. So there was this guy named Lord Kitchener, and he was depicted on this poster 3 years earlier, where he is in that similar sort of pointing pose, and he sort of has this late Victorian, early Edwardian, kind of waxed mustache, right? Very, very British, stiff upper lip, and he is pointing at the viewer for a similar cause. So Flagg had actually created this image for the July 6th, 1916 cover of a magazine called Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper. And it had the headline, "What are you doing for preparedness?" So it still had the same you situation. It was still pointing at the viewer. So America was involved in this war. The war had started a couple years earlier. And when America entered World War I, there were a number of illustrators that really rallied in the service of supporting the country. And there was a guy named Charles Dana Gibson, and he had what was called the Division of Pictorial Publicity. I love that.
Yeah.
So again, with this media landscape, you think about propaganda, quick reads, posters, illustrations, this whole thing to bolster patriotism. So this was a natural fit for the war effort. And Flagg actually ultimately produced artwork for 46 different war effort posters. So very similar to the Westinghouse campaign for World War II.
Interesting.
So this poster, luckily there were a few more copies printed than just a couple thousand, or really 1,800, I think you said, right?
1,800, yeah.
Okay, so the first iteration of this for World War I, there were 4 million copies of the poster printed. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, it was revived again for World War II. I tried to find how many copies were printed during World War II. I could not find that number.
Okay.
But again, if I had to guess, I'm sure it was probably in the millions.
Yeah, I would imagine it had to be a lot more than World War I.
Yeah, one would think. So, Flagg, so who was the model for this? Right? This is the big thing. You talked about the model getting revealed for Rosie the Riveter. So Flagg ended up using his own face for Uncle Sam, but he made himself look older, and he added the white goatee. And he said that he did it. It wasn't an ego trip. He just didn't want to bother arranging for a model. But this guy, and we'll get into some of his lifestyle in just a minute. So he actually knew FDR in his social circle.
Oh, really?
And so FDR actually praised him for his resourcefulness, for being his own model. And it's so funny because thinking about Norman Rockwell, he kind of like Alfred Hitchcock, he always had his own cameos in a lot of his stuff. So I think it's great that Flagg was sort of pulling a Norman Rockwell as well, just sticking himself as the character in this poster.
Yeah.
But he also had a neighbor who was a veteran, this guy named Walter Botts, Botts. And Walter was the one who posed as the model for Uncle Sam's body. He had the broad shoulders. He had the thrusting forefinger. He was a war veteran. This all made sense. So I want to talk really quickly. You mentioned that Rosie the Riveter has this huge, huge, huge cultural impact. Well, I want to talk about some of the pop culture bona fides of the Uncle Sam poster.
Oh, yeah.
It was also copied. It was so successful, it was actually copied by German and Soviet militaries for their for their own propaganda. Okay. Now, Smokey Bear, you remember, only you can prevent forest fires. Yeah. So guess what that was a takeoff of, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, Todd, the Stripes poster with Bill Murray. We
that
can't
was
leave
what
that
I was
out.
going to say.
Yeah. So, and there are, even if you go and do an internet search now, you'll find a bunch of other, just like Rosie the Riveter, you'll find a bunch of other.
It's just been parodied.
Yeah. It's, it's sort of, these two posters were memes before memes were a thing, right?
Right.
Okay. So I have to talk about the most patriotically named artist, James Montgomery Flagg. So who is this guy? Yeah. He was known to his friends as Monty. So let's refer to him as Monty. So
Monty Flagg.
Yeah, Monty was born in 1877 and he loved art from a young age. This guy was an incredible talent. By the time he was 14, he was contributing to Life magazine as an illustrator.
What?
Isn't this nuts?
Wow.
So in 1894 and until 1898, he attended the Art Students League in New York. And he also studied fine art in London and Paris from 1898 to 1900. I mean, this is bonkers. True Renaissance.
Is that where
man.
he learned? Is that where he learned to draw Cubby?
I think so. I think that's where he learned to draw the turtle, draw the bear, the pirate.
That's how you get famous, folks.
That is. Hey, it worked for Charles Schultz.
That's right.
So listen to our episode on what was that? Our comic art
book
episode.
advertising.
Yeah, comic book advertising. We'll post a link to that too. So he comes back to the U.S. and he starts to produce countless illustrations for books and magazine covers, political cartoons, humorous cartoons, advertising illustrations, spot drawings, and his favored medium was pen and ink, but he also worked in oils, watercolor, and sculpture. And it looks to me like this poster, Uncle Sam, was done as a watercolor. Mm-hmm. At his peak, Monty, or Flagg, was reported...
Monty,
we're calling him Monty, so we're on a first-name basis. So Monty was reported to have been the highest-paid magazine illustrator in America. I mean, this is bonkers.
Wow.
And like Rockwell, worked for the Saturday Evening Post, worked for Collier's, and those were two of the most popular magazines at the time. Like, it's hard to emphasize today how huge magazines were the internet 100 years ago.
Right.
I mean, they printed millions of copies of these things.
Yeah.
And apart from his work as an illustrator, Monty painted portraits which reveal the influence of John Singer Sargent. So again, a very famous fine artist. And people who sat for him included Mark Twain. You heard of him. He went on to do a thing or two. Ethel Barrymore. He had a portrait of Jack Dempsey, the boxer. So that's hanging in the Great Hall of the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. So you can go see some of his original work. Okay, Todd, we're in a bar. And it's a good thing that I brought our friend Monty along, because in 1948, he appeared in an ad for PBR. He was in a magazine ad, and it featured him working at an easel in his New York studio. And since it is ladies' night, he had a young lady standing at his side and a tray with a couple of open bottles of PBR, and 2 glasses sat before him.
Living the illustrator life. Man.
Absolutely.
I'm talking, that's illustrator money right there.
That is, man. And I mean, he had enough money. We got to get a round of PBRs after this in honor of our friend. I mean, there's just no question. Yeah. You'll love this. He had an autobiography he published. What do you think the title of it was?
Flags and Stripes.
You'd think it'd be Stars and Stripes, Flag Day. I mean, there's no. Yeah. Roses and Buckshot.
No.
That sounds like a country duo, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like opening
a country sort of metal group or something.
Guns and Roses and Buckshot.
Yeah.
And he was an incredibly colorful character. But sadly, his failing eyesight forced him to give up art. And he died in 1960. So, but I don't know. I think he went out with a bang, right? I mean, Roses and Buckshot.
Yeah.
He hung out with Mark Twain,
Yeah.
painted arguably the most iconic piece of propaganda ever in history.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk about, and this is something doing this research that I never really thought about deeply, but Uncle Sam. So this character of Uncle Sam. Who's Uncle Sam? Like, what's the deal with that?
Yeah.
So, and this was an aha moment for me as I was digging around on this. Uncle Sam, U.S., United States, U.S. So, Uncle Sam.
Hadn't known that before?
I just never thought about it. I'll be honest
Okay.
with you. I just never thought about it.
Okay.
So Uncle Sam is a common personification of the U.S., but really it's the government.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the country as a whole, kind of, sort of, but it's really more the federal government. And since the early 19th century, Uncle Sam has been, popular symbol, and it's really extended into American culture around the globe, right? And it's sort of this manifestation of patriotism and the emotion associated with that. And he also developed notoriety in military propaganda, not only because of this poster, but also of other posters he appears in. And we'll put some of these on the episode page.
Okay.
But according to legend, Uncle Sam was actually a character that came into use during the War of 1812, so almost 100 years before this poster.
Okay.
And it may, and I'm going to stress may, have been named after a guy named Samuel Wilson, who was a meat packer, and he lived in Troy, New York. But the reason he was important is he was actually, long story short, he became the meat inspector for the U.S. Army during the War of 1812.
Well, that is important.
Yeah, so he was, providing provisions, he was inspecting things. And then many years later, in 1961, Congress adopted a resolution saying, and I quote, "Resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives that the Congress salutes Uncle Sam Wilson of Troy, New York, as the progenitor of America's national symbol of Uncle Sam." Close quote. And that's fine and good that Congress said all that, but the actual origin, no one truly knows. So, it's one of these things, wasn't it? William Randolph Hearst that said, if the story's better than the truth, print the story.
Right.
So I think this is one of those cases. So while the figure of Uncle Sam specifically represents the government, the female figure of Columbia represents the U.S. as a nation. So you think Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. So it's ladies' night, Todd. So I felt I needed to make sure that we included that.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Now, here's something. So we always talk about with iconic, whether it's a logo or a character, if you were to draw it, how would you draw it and what would it look like? So I would say if you stopped a typical person and you were to say, draw Uncle Sam's hat, right?
Yeah.
I would say a majority of people would draw a hat with a blue band and they'd put some white stars on the hat, but then they would put red vertical stripes on the hat.
Yeah, of course.
But in the original flag illustration, there aren't any stripes on the hat. It's just a blank white hat with the blue band.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I'm trying to figure out, I need to do a little bit of digging, but I'm trying to figure out when that extra flourish, when Apollo Creed was about to fight Ivan Drago, Todd, in Rocky IV, his hat, I looked this up, his hat had ample red stripes on it. Now, I don't want to be a critic, but maybe that's why he lost the fight.
Well, stranger things have happened, but you're right. The stripes had to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, we know by the end of that fight, Apollo was seeing stars.
Yeah, there you go.
But at any rate, we had, between Rosie the Riveter and Uncle Sam, two giant figures, I think we can agree. Two giant figures in the world of pop culture.
Yeah, agreed. And also, speaking of giant figures, I just saw our tab.
Uncle Sam may see it as a tax deduction, Todd.
Rosie may see it as me getting nailed.
I'm starting to question your allegiances.
Till next time.